The first time my husband said the account was frozen, he said it too casually. That was what stayed with me later. Not the words themselves, because marriages are full of inconvenient sentences that sound temporary when you first hear them. Cards get flagged. Banks freeze things. Fraud alerts happen. Payroll gets delayed. There are 100 adult explanations for money becoming briefly inaccessible, and most of them are boring enough to be believed. It was the tone, flat, irritated, already done with the conversation before it had properly started. He said it on a Wednesday night while I was standing at the kitchen counter trying to pay the electric bill from my laptop. The payment page kept rejecting the transfer from our joint checking account, and after the third attempt, I looked up and asked, "Did something happen with the bank?" Daniel didn't even glance away from the TV. "Account's frozen," he said. I stared at him. "What do you mean frozen?" He sighed like I was asking him to explain weather. "I mean the bank froze it, probably because of that weird gas station fraud alert from last week. I called. They said it should clear in a day or two." That should have been enough, maybe, if he had looked annoyed at the bank instead of annoyed at me. But he didn't. He kept watching the screen. One arm stretched along the couch, shoes still on, tie loosened, the posture of a man trying very hard to look normal inside a moment that wasn't. "How much is in there?" I asked. He shrugged. "Same as usual." "Did they tell you whether auto pays will still go through?" "I don't know, Mara." Not, "I'll check," not "I already asked." Just irritation, quick and blunt, the way someone talks when the details are dangerous. I closed the laptop slowly. "Why didn't you mention it earlier?" He finally looked at me then, and his expression was perfectly calibrated. Not defensive, not guilty, slightly tired, slightly put upon like I was making something harder than it needed to be. "Because I handled it," he said. "I didn't think it needed to become a whole thing." A whole thing. That phrase had become more common in our marriage over the past year. Small questions became whole things. Follow-ups became whole things. Me asking why his direct deposit had changed banks 3 months earlier became a whole thing. Me wondering why he suddenly kept his phone face down all the time became me looking for drama. Every marriage has stretches where two people speak past each other. Ours had become a stretch where I was apparently the only one still trying to speak directly. Still, I let it go that night. Not because I believed him completely, because I was tired, and there is a kind of marital fatigue that feels almost identical to trust until something breaks. The next morning, my card was declined at the pharmacy. Not for groceries, not for some extravagant purchase. $12.47 for allergy medication and toothpaste. I stood there with the little plastic basket in my hand while the cashier gave me the embarrassed half-smile cashiers use when they need to pretend your finances are not happening in public. "Do you want to try it again?" she asked. I did. Declined. I used my personal credit card instead and sat in my car afterward with the receipt in my lap, staring at the steering wheel. Frozen accounts do not usually decline debit cards that cleanly unless the freeze is real and broad. Daniel had said a day or two. Daniel had said he handled it. Daniel had said same as usual. So I called the bank. I should say here that I was on the joint account, not just as a spouse with a household card. My name was on it. My direct consulting payments landed there twice a month. My bill money came out of it. My half of the mortgage came out of it. Whatever story Daniel thought he was telling, legally and practically, the account belonged to both of us. After 8 minutes of hold music and one transfer, a woman named Cynthia verified my identity and asked how she could help. "I'm trying to understand why our checking account is frozen," I said. "My husband said there was a fraud hold." There was a short pause, then keyboard sounds, then another pause, slightly longer. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "I'm not seeing a fraud freeze on this account." I sat up straighter in the driver's seat. "What do you mean?" "I'm seeing a temporary review marker from 2 days ago," she said, "but the account is not frozen due to external fraud activity." The words landed one by one. "Then why was my debit card declined?" "One moment." More typing. "The available balance is currently much lower than the ledger balance," she said. "There are several pending charges." My throat tightened. What charges? I can review recent activity with you. Please. I expected something local, maybe a large payment, maybe a transfer Daniel forgot to mention, maybe some ugly but still domestic explanation. Instead, Cynthia read the first one aloud. Hotel Aragon, Phoenix, Arizona, $912.20. For a second, my brain simply stopped interpreting language. Phoenix? Yes, ma'am. I looked through the windshield at the pharmacy parking lot, at the cart return, at a man loading bottled water into the back of an SUV, all of it stupidly normal. Can you repeat that? She did, then the next. Desert Crest Car Rental, Phoenix, Arizona, $438 pending. Then another. Copper Room Lounge, Phoenix, Arizona, $186.12. Then another. Mirage Spa Services, Phoenix, Arizona, $209. She kept talking, but I had already gone cold. Phoenix. Daniel had not mentioned Phoenix. Daniel was supposed to be in Columbus that week for a dull 3-day regional logistics meeting he had complained about for 10 straight days beforehand. Columbus was familiar, repetitive, safe. Phoenix had never entered the conversation once. Stop, I said quietly. Cynthia did. Can you tell me the dates? Beginning Monday afternoon and continuing through this morning. Monday afternoon. He had left Monday morning with one carry-on, a laptop bag, and the sort of ordinary kiss on my forehead that long marriages often reduce departures to. Back Thursday night, he had said. Boring trip, he had said. Too many PowerPoints, he had said. I asked one more question because part of me still wanted the answer to be administrative, however impossible that now was. Were these card-present charges? Yes, ma'am. The hotel and lounge appear to have been transacted in person. Not frozen, not fraud, spent. Spent in a city my husband had never mentioned while telling me our account was inaccessible. I thanked Cynthia, ended the call, and sat motionless for a full minute. Then I opened Daniel's messages. Nothing about Phoenix. I opened our shared calendar. His trip still said Columbus Regional Review. I checked the airline confirmation he had forwarded me the previous week. Departure city correct. Return city correct. But when I looked more closely at the tiny line of text under the reservation number, the destination wasn't visible anymore because the attachment had been converted into one of those image-heavy mobile summaries that hides useful detail. It suddenly occurred to me that I had never actually opened the full itinerary. I had trusted the verbal version, so I searched my email for the original forwarded confirmation. It wasn't there. Only the image summary. That was the second moment my stomach dropped, because Daniel was not a man who edited travel details for fun. He was a man who believed organization reflected character. He color-coded luggage tags. He packed charger cables into labeled mesh pouches. He mocked people who missed flights because they operated emotionally. And yet somehow I had only the vaguest possible version of the one document that could confirm where he actually went. I drove home instead of going to the office. Halfway there, I called his cell. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I didn't leave one. I called again 10 minutes later. Voicemail again. At home, I went straight to the file drawer in the study where we kept the practical bones of our life. Tax returns, mortgage statements, insurance, pay stubs, appliance warranties, copies of passports, old vehicle titles, all the boring paper proof that 2 people have built something together. I found the travel folder where Daniel dropped work itineraries for reimbursement. Nothing for this week. No printed boarding passes. No hotel confirmation. No conference packet. That by itself wouldn't have meant much for another person. For Daniel, it meant everything. He printed everything. Always. I sat on the study floor with the drawer still open and thought backward. The last 6 months. The new password on his laptop. The way he had started showering the second he got home, phone always carried into the bathroom. The sudden insistence that his bonus had been smaller this year, even though we seemed to be burning more cash. The weird tension around money he kept framing as temporary cash flow weirdness. The time he snapped at me for asking why there was a florist charge from a hotel bar in Nashville. "Client, thank you," he had said, the way he had been sleeping badly but smiling more often at his screen. The tiny things you can explain individually until the explanation itself becomes a full-time job. At 1:16 p.m., the bank app updated again. Another pending charge. Room service, Hotel Aragon, $73. I stared at it so hard my eyes started to ache. Then another one posted 3 minutes later. Valet parking. Then another. Late checkout fee. He wasn't at a conference. He was in a hotel, comfortable enough to bill breakfast to our joint account after telling me the money was frozen. I called the hotel before I could think too hard about whether I wanted the answer. A polite man answered and transferred me to guest services. I used the line I had heard people use in movies and always thought sounded melodramatic until it came out of my own mouth. "I need to confirm whether my husband is a guest there." There was a pause. "Ma'am, for privacy reasons," I cut in, "the room charges are hitting my bank account right now." Silence. Then, "One moment." I heard typing. Then the shift. Not permission, caution. "I can confirm the reservation is active under Daniel Mercer." Active. Under his real name. He wasn't even hiding enough to use an alias. "What room?" I asked. "I'm sorry, I can't provide." "Is he alone?" "I can't disclose guest details." Guest details. Plural would have told me too much. Singular would have too. So she said details and let the word do the work of ambiguity. "Fine," I said. "Then tell me this. Is the reservation for one person or two?" "I can't provide occupancy information." That was answer enough. I hung up and immediately felt sick. Not because I had proof of an affair yet. I didn't. Hotels can hold colleagues. Business can be messy. There were still explanations, technically, but none of those explanations included lying about the account being frozen. Lying had already happened. The rest was just shape. At 2:04, Daniel finally texted. "In meetings. What's up?" I looked at those 3 words until anger finally pushed through the hurt. What's up? As if I had not spent half the day following our money to a city he never mentioned. I called him immediately. He answered this time, voice lowered. "Hey!" I said, "I'm in meetings." "You're in Phoenix." Silence. Not confusion. Not what? Silence. Then who told you that? That question tells on people more efficiently than any confession. "The bank," I said, "since the account isn't frozen." Longer silence, then an exhale. Okay. Okay. That was all. I stood in our kitchen gripping the phone so hard my hand hurt. "Do you understand how insane that sounds?" I asked. "You told me our money was frozen while you were charging a hotel, a rental car, drinks, a spa, and room service in Arizona." "Lower your voice," he said automatically. That nearly made me laugh. "I am alone in my own kitchen. Mara, I can explain." "Then explain." He didn't answer right away, and the reason he didn't answer right away was because the real explanation was choosing among versions, not retrieving truth. "It's a client situation," he said finally. "Sensitive. I didn't want to get into it before I was home." "A spa is a client situation? That charge isn't what it looks like." "Then what is it?" "It's bundled under the hotel." "Then why did you lie about the account being frozen?" Another pause. I needed time. There it was. Not confusion, not protection, time. Time to do what exactly was still wide open. To tell me what? "That's what I'm trying to do now." "No," I said. "Now you're reacting because I found it." He went quiet again. I kept going because once you realize someone has been relying on your patience as cover, it becomes very hard to stop speaking. "What city are you actually in right now?" "Phoenix." "Why?" He exhaled. "I'm with someone from the firm." I waited. The silence after that sentence was the sort of silence people leave on purpose because they want credit for partial honesty. "A client?" I asked. "No." "A woman, then." He didn't say it, but no mattered more than yes would have. "A co-worker?" "Yes." I closed my eyes. "How long?" "Don't do this over the phone." "How long, Daniel?" He was quiet so long I thought he might hang up. Then he said very softly, Since March. March. It was October. I sat down at the kitchen table because my legs suddenly didn't feel entirely attached to the rest of me. March. 7 months of ordinary dinners, dry cleaning, shared grocery lists, me reminding him to call his dentist, him asking whether we should repaint the guest room, all of it now sliding sideways under the weight of one word. "Who is she?" I asked. Another silence. Then, "You don't know her." That made me laugh then, one short, ugly laugh. "Is that supposed to help?" No, it isn't." He tried again. "It wasn't supposed to become expensive enough to empty our checking account. Mara, you told me our account was frozen. I know. You let me find out at the pharmacy that you were spending our money in another city. I know." The repetition of it made something inside me harden, not because he was remorseful, because he was trying to keep the conversation at the level of emotional damage, where apologies might still function, instead of letting it move into logistics, deceit, and theft, where they could not. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, and my own voice sounded very far away but very steady. "I am transferring my money out of the joint account, freezing the rest, and calling a lawyer before you get home." Mara, don't be dramatic. I almost admired the reflex, even now, even here. Dramatic is you being in Phoenix with another woman while telling me the bank froze our account. This is administration. He didn't answer that. Instead, he said, tired now, "Can we please just talk when I'm back?" No. I ended the call. Then I did exactly what I said I would do. I transferred what I legally could into my personal account. I called the bank back and had alerts placed on every outgoing transaction above $50. I opened a new checking account at a different bank. I changed the password on every household bill login I controlled. Then I called my friend Elise, who is the sort of friend every woman should have at least once in her life. Not the softest, not the gentlest, but the one who hears your voice for 6 seconds and says, "I'm coming over, and don't clean anything." She arrived with Thai food, a legal pad, and zero interest in comforting lies. By the time I finished telling her everything, she had written 3 headings: money, property, timeline. "Good," she said. "Now stop crying for 10 minutes and think like a witness." So I did. March. That was when Daniel had started traveling more for leadership visibility. That was when he stopped wanting me to come to company events. That was when our anniversary dinner got moved twice because of forecast reviews. That was when he began mentioning one name more than others in passing without ever saying it mattered. Nina. Nina said this. Nina's team handled that. Nina might get pulled into West Coast expansion. Never enough to stand out at the time, plenty once you were bleeding and looking backward. Elise took my phone, opened Daniel's company website, and found her in under 2 minutes. Nina Kessler, Director, Strategic Partnerships, Phoenix Regional Expansion Lead. I stared at the headshot until my stomach twisted. Blonde, blazer, clean corporate smile. Exactly the kind of woman who looks expensive in a way that doesn't photograph as vulgar. Exactly the kind of woman a married man convinces himself is not a cliché because she has a title. "Okay," Elise said. "Now we know." "No," I said quietly. "Now I know her name." That night I didn't sleep in our bedroom. Not because Daniel was there. He wasn't. Because the room itself had become contaminated by context. At 11:42 p.m., the bank alert went off again. One last hotel charge. Minibar. I laughed into the dark, because at that point the absurdity had become too precise to carry any other way. The next morning, I went to the bank in person. Then I went to a family law attorney recommended by Elise's sister. Then I went home and opened Daniel's desk drawer. I didn't have to search far. Under a stack of quarterly reports was a slim envelope from a jeweler in Scottsdale. Inside was a receipt. Not for a wedding ring. Not for anything grand enough to make the betrayal cinematic. A bracelet, white gold, purchased in August, paid from his private credit card, gift message omitted. That tiny omission hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted the card, because it meant intimacy without sentiment. Ongoing, efficient, real enough not to need ceremony. When Daniel came home Thursday evening, I was sitting at the dining table with copies of the bank statements, the hotel charges, the Scottsdale receipt, and a yellow legal pad of my own. He stood in the doorway longer than necessary, overnight bag still in his hand. He looked tired, genuinely tired, which I might once have mistaken for guilt. Now it just looked like travel. "Mara," he said. I did not stand up. "Sit." He set the bag down slowly. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator in the next room. He sat. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at the papers and said, "You went through my things." "No," I said. "I organized mine." That shut him up. Good. I had learned something important in the previous 24 hours. Once a liar loses control of the timeline, they often try to recover dignity through procedural complaints, privacy, tone, process, anything except the actual thing. "I want one honest version," I said. "Not the edited one, not the one where you were going to tell me eventually, not the one where work got complicated. One version." He rubbed one hand over his face. "It started in March." I said nothing. "We were put on the Phoenix expansion together. We traveled. We spent time together. It got out of hand." Out of hand, as if it were a shopping cart rolling downhill by itself. "How many trips?" He hesitated. "6. I nodded once. "How much money?" "What?" "How much marital money did you spend on her? On this, on hotel charges you knew I'd see eventually?" He looked offended by the question, which told me the answer mattered. "I don't know." "Then estimate." He stared at the table. "A few thousand." Elise had been right. Witness mode. "Did you ever intend to tell me?" He gave the sort of answer people give when they know the truth is ugly and are hoping vagueness will pass for complexity. "I didn't know what I was going to do." "You knew what you were doing." He looked up then, and for the first time there was actual emotion in his face. Not enough, but real. "I never wanted to hurt you." I felt something close to pity then, which frightened me more than anger. Because pity is dangerous. Pity invites management. It makes the betrayed person start helping the betrayer narrate himself humanely. So I looked at the bank statement instead. "You already did," I said, "and then you billed it to me." That was the sentence that finally reached him. His face changed, not because it was poetic, because it was accurate. The next weeks were ugly in the normal, adult, paperwork-heavy way betrayals usually are. Separate accounts, lawyer letters, an emergency agreement over mortgage payments, a spreadsheet of recurring expenses. Me learning exactly how many pieces of a life can be jointly owned by two people who no longer share truth. What I learned later, and this part almost broke me in a different way, was that Phoenix wasn't the first city. It was just the first one sloppy enough to surface. There had been Nashville in June, Denver in July, a training summit in Santa Fe that apparently involved no summit at all. I found them one by one the way archaeologists must find bones, not looking for pain exactly, just removing enough dirt to see the full shape of what was already there. Different hotels, different restaurants, same card patterns, same lies. The frozen account story had not been invented from nowhere. It had been improvised because the lies were finally overlapping badly enough that he needed a delay. That was the real insult in the end. Not just that he cheated, not just that he lied, that he used the machinery of our shared life to cushion his timing. The joint account, the bills, the practical trust that makes marriage function on ordinary Tuesdays. He took the least romantic part of loving someone, shared administration, and turned it into camouflage. We separated before the year ended, divorced the next summer. People always ask later in the careful voice reserved for broken marriages whether there was one moment when I knew it was over. There were many, but the clearest was not the confession, not the Phoenix charges, not even the hotel. It was the pharmacy. Standing there with toothpaste and allergy medicine while my card was declined, still half believing I was dealing with a boring banking problem, while my husband was in another city spending our money on a life he had not had the courage to name. That was the exact moment the marriage split into before and after. Before, I thought confusion meant complication. After, I understood that confusion is often a structure somebody builds for you while they move freely inside the truth. And once you see that clearly, once the charges post and the city name appears and the account is not frozen at all, but merely drained by a lie, there is no going back to being the woman who says, okay, I'll wait a day or two.